All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to be broadcasting on both YouTube and TikTok. So if you're just joining in, feel free to ask questions in the chat and I'll go through and answer as many as I can, going back and forth between both YouTube and TikTok, because I know several of you are trying to cram the night before the AP Lang exam. So feel free to ask any questions that you have. Although I hope you guys are not staying up too late because it really is important to get a good night's sleep. Although my students tell me that sleep is overrated. So, all right, welcome. Looks like we got a couple watching over on TikTok. So, welcome. You're nervous for tomorrow's test. Yeah. So, here's the thing, you just got to trust yourself. You've been working toward it all year, you know the gist of it. So, just believe in yourself. And there's going to be times where it's going to feel hard. So, just trust yourself. Don't doubt yourself in the moment. And I know that's easier said than done, but you're gonna be okay for the test tomorrow. So if you're just joining us, welcome. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. But yeah, of course, it's an AP test. It's gonna be nerve-wracking because you don't know what the prompts are gonna be and all that. But like honestly, it's gonna be okay. Can you go over some powerful verbs? Sure. So we wanted, at least for like general essay verbs, like all three essays. Some verbs that lead to commentary would be verbs like highlights, illustrates, suggests, demonstrates, reveals. Those can all be useful. If you're referring to like a source in synthesis or possibly even the rhetorical analysis, you can say something like acknowledges, presents, focuses on, includes. Those can be strong verbs as well. We want to avoid things like makes a point or to get their point across or like to paint a picture in the reader's minds. Verbs like criticizes, justifies, those all work too. But yeah, for rhetorical analysis, you want to use strong verbs. Really, for all three essays, you want to try to use strong verbs. What can I do to study last minute? I actually just uploaded a video about this pretty recently. So let me tell you, if it's the night before, let me tell you what I would do. Figure out what your weakest area is and focus on that. I have several videos on YouTube. So if you have a certain topic that you want help on, definitely go look at a couple of those videos if you want to. I would read sample essays from the College Board, especially if your teachers didn't show you those. What you do to access those is you go and you can type in your search bar, College, or not, you don't type in College Board, type in AP Lang past exam prompts, like PAST, past exam prompts, and read the sample essays. If it's a current one and it was scored on the 6-point rubric, then do essays that scored 4 out of 6 or higher and look at those and read the scoring commentary. They started putting those in a separate document. But see why it got the score that it did. I think that would be the most helpful. If you wrote essays this year and you got good scores on them or got feedback on them, it's also a good idea to go back and reread those. So that's what I would do if you're like wanting to study. Obviously, like there's only so much you can do the night before, but that would be where I would start. What structure do I need for a rhetorical analysis thesis? Okay, so for rhetorical analysis thesis, there's 2 parts that you need. Technically, you just have to have rhetorical choices, but they really like to see rhetorical choices and the message, argument, or purpose. So I have some sentence frames that I give students for this on YouTube. And I also somebody asked about them on TikTok. So I just kind of like re-recorded the video or like re-uploaded it. So it's like my most recent TikTok where I gave like screenshots of some of my videos where it's like a sentence frame and an example. But you would basically say something to the effect of like in and like so-and-so, whatever the speaker's name is, you can put their tone word. So like in so-and-so's passionate speech or something, patriotic speech, whatever it is. He or she, they, whatever you want to use. And then you say like choice 1 and choice 2. So like they provide examples of blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, like create a common enemy in order to, and then you tell us the purpose. So choices plus purpose, message, or argument. Excuse me. How do I directly quote documents for synthesis? Make sure you cite them. So you don't want to say according to source A, but what you can say is like, let's say source A is like a magazine article. You can say something like, according to a 2017 article in Forbes magazine. And then or according to this author. And then like give their credentials. So let's say the College Board would never use me as a source, but let's say they did. According to Beth Hall, an AP Lang teacher from Arkansas, and then you would introduce like what I said or paraphrase it, direct quote it. At the end of that, put a parenthetical citation. So that's when you put it in parentheses and you put, it's like source A and then, so parentheses, source A, close parentheses, and then like the period goes outside. So that's how you can do that. I'm sorry, I'll have something stuck in my throat. I'll try not to cough the entire time. Okay, let me go check TikTok and see what we got going on over here because I'm on both TikTok and YouTube at the same time. How do you think of evidence for an argument essay? I use the acronym CHORES. There's ReHugo, there's Gopher, like teachers use all kinds of acronyms. Basically, think of real life examples, current events, history, outside knowledge. So you could talk about like if it's relevant, TV shows, movies, sports, reading, experiences. You can talk about personal experience, science. That's what CHORES is, that whole acronym I just said. But think of stuff that you know well and that you could explain. So it has to be related to your thesis. But really just think about like based on what my claim is, what is the best evidence to prove that claim? Like what is the best example I can give? And then like explain why it proves your claim. Is it good to have one counter than supporting arguments? Okay, so here's the thing about like counterclaims. They're not necessary. So there's not really like a best formula for it, but make sure you're proving your own argument first, or I shouldn't say first, but make sure that your own argument is clear, because sometimes students throw in a counterclaim and a rebuttal and it just kind of falls flat. So I tell my students only do it if they think it's really strong, because otherwise your time is better spent just proving your own points. Someone said, I remember watching your videos 2 years ago to take the AP Lang exam. I got it too because I wasted too much time not rating anything and overthinking it. I just want to thank you though. Well, thank you for coming back. I'm sorry you didn't get the score you wanted, but this person just said that they were wasting time on the exam by like overthinking it. So I think that's good advice to everybody now is don't overthink it, because you have to write something down. Like they can't grade or score you if there's nothing on your paper. So something is better than nothing. Remember that all 3 essays require a thesis, evidence, and commentary. So you want to make sure that you have like absolute worst case scenario, write a thesis and at least 1 body paragraph, ideally 2. Any tips to improve a rhetorical analysis thesis? Yes. Use strong verbs as opposed to nouns, and also be sure to explicitly state what the purpose, message, or argument is. Sometimes they provide that in the prompt, but like go beyond what they tell you if you can. Are there any disadvantages to not writing conclusions? Yes and no. A conclusion is helpful if, number 1, your thesis wasn't defensible the first time and you restate it. I've seen that happen very rarely, but it can happen. It's also helpful if you can situate the issue in a broader context. But usually what I see for conclusions on the AP test is kind of like 1 or 2 sentences that tells me literally a summary of what I just read, and it's usually not necessary. So the benefit to conclusions is if you can situate the issue in a broader context and really think like big picture, why does this matter? Because sometimes even if you don't get the sophistication point, what you say helps your commentary. If you are running out of time tomorrow, the first thing that you should like omit from your essay is a conclusion. It is not necessary. I told my students today, if you are writing and you are at the maximum amount of time that you're supposed to be spending on that particular essay, you should move on. Like, do not write the conclusion, because it's probably not going to help in most cases. What is your opinion on using personal knowledge in the synthesis essay? Is it impressive or unnecessary? It depends on the prompt. So last year's prompt was about cursive writing, and I totally think kids could have connected it to personal experience. Some of the sources lended themselves to that, but like a couple years before that, it was wind farms, and like unless you live by one, like you might not have any personal experience to connect with that. So I think it really depends on the prompt, but just don't lose sight of the task. You're supposed to cite the 3 sources, so that's like the most important thing. What if I can't spot any rhetorical analysis choices in a passage? Word choice and tone are always there. Ask yourself, what is the writer doing? Because sometimes it's not about knowing like a fancy choice. Think about like, are they flattering? Are they criticizing? Are they trying to rally the audience and like create a common enemy? And like, what are they doing? So are they trying to like make the audience trust them? Are they trying to make the audience like to prepare them for some like harsh news or whatever it is? So just ask yourself, what are they doing? That's like my go-to if you can't find a rhetorical choice. Okay, so let me find some on TikTok. How do you think of evidence for the argument essay? Really rely on like current, not current examples, you can, but really rely on factual evidence. If you studied for like, let's say you're in APUSH or AP World, you know a lot of historical evidence. I can't promise that it's going to matter. Like for all I know, because the prompts recently have been like about abstract concepts. For all I know, tomorrow they could be like, the prompt could be something like super concrete. Like there's one on AP Classroom that has to do with like a cell phone policy. And I gave that to my students, or a couple of my students, and they were like, what is this? This is not like because they were used to like the ones about exploring the unknown and integrity and grit. And then I gave them a prompt about cell phones, and they were like, this is not the same. So here's the thing, like, I can't promise you that it's going to be this like abstract concept, but you have like a lot of knowledge that you might not realize. You have a whole lifetime of personal experience. You have probably taken history, biology, other classes. Use that information as you can. You're also probably an expert in other things, whether it's sports and like sports figures, or theater, or books. Like I have one student who I normally don't encourage students to use fiction as evidence, but she's an avid reader and she's read more classics than I have, and she makes great references to these as evidence in her essays. But she's my only student who can do that because like it's her expertise. I have another student who I used to be her soccer coach, and she can connect to like Alex Morgan and all kinds of stuff and make it great. Simone Biles, I know she's a gymnast, but like she can write about athletes, and like it's great. So you got to play to your strengths. I've had kids write about different movies and TV shows effectively. So just kind of keep that in mind. Should I be adding my voice to rhetorical analysis or let it be? It kind of depends on what you mean by adding your voice, but just going off of that comment, I would say that's more of like an argument or synthesis thing. Like it's nice to have some personality there, but like don't force it. Just like follow the task. Thank you for the hearts over on TikTok. Easiest way to earn sophistication. I think it's situating the issue in a broader context, personally, like thinking like big picture. Tips on the multiple choice, especially for reading. Okay. Use process of elimination. If you're pressed for time, the questions about like what is the function of this paragraph, or what does this word mean, those are usually easier to answer, or like they're faster. If they ask you what a word means, make sure you read the surrounding sentences too, like a couple lines above it and below it, or like the whole paragraph that it's in, because there's usually a context clue that helps you figure out what the word means. And sometimes it's before it and sometimes it's after, but it's not necessarily in the actual sentence. Answer choices that are only partially right are not the right answer. So it could say like this and this. If one of those is wrong, and you're like, that's definitely wrong, it's not your answer, even if the first one's right. Be mindful of answers that are like too general or vague, or like they're talking about a different part of the passage, because those are wrong. So also, like, it's going to sound really obvious, but make sure the choice that you're choosing actually answers that question. Like a lot of times it sounds like a good answer, but like make sure it's actually answering the question you're talking about. So those will be just some general reading tips. I think the reading questions are harder in general than the writing questions. This is like a teacher theory. This is not confirmed by the College Board, but if the passage is difficult to read, sometimes the questions themselves are actually easier to answer. And if the passage is really easy, sometimes the questions are harder to answer. But that's just like teacher theory. That's not like proven. Thank you to those that are helping each other out in the comments, answering questions as well, because I'm trying to go through all of them, but there's a lot on both TikTok and YouTube. Is it better to have 2 examples and a counter or 3 examples? It depends on your argument, to be honest. If you think it's a strong counter, then go for it. If you have a 3rd example that you would rather use, go for that. And because I know this question is probably on there somewhere, is it okay to have 2 body paragraphs? Yes. A lot of my students just do 2 body paragraphs and just develop them, and it's fine. Any tips on improving your commentary for synthesis? Explain the significance of the examples you choose. Like if you give us like a fact or a statistic or something from one of the sources, like what does that show us? Or like what does that reveal? And ask yourself, like, why does this matter? You could also think about like, who does this help or harm? And like short-term and long-term effects, things like that. So commentary in general, you're going to ask yourself, like, why does this matter? Or like, so what? Things like that. And try to put more commentary than evidence. So keep asking yourself why. Use the word because. I know it sounds simple, but that really helps. What's the easiest way to earn sophistication? I think it's situating the issue in a broader context, but honestly, I feel like the sophistication point is so rare that like, don't focus on the sophistication point, focus on the evidence and commentary points. Those are actually where you get your score, in my opinion. All right. Someone said, thank you. You're welcome. I'm glad y'all are here cramming with me. Let's see. How many rhetorical devices should we put in? Okay, so here's the thing. Like like lowest number is 2 because you want 1 main idea per paragraph and a minimum of 2 body paragraphs if possible. Sometimes choices are related to each other though. So like as you're looking at repetition, you could also look at like the word choice, like the word that they're repeating. So sometimes you kind of can partner them together if that makes sense. So it could be as small as 2, it could be as many as like 4, 5. It kind of depends. But like you usually have 1 main one and then like some that are working with it that you might mention. But the idea is to think about what are they doing in the beginning, middle, and end of their passage. What do you need to take to the exam? You do need pencils. I would not recommend mechanical. Just get regular like lead number 2 pencils. You need pens, blue or black ink. Our school doesn't require an ID. I don't know if anyone else's school told them to bring an ID. If you're on YouTube and your school said to bring an ID, would you say that in the comments so that person knows? You can also, usually you can bring a snack. Our school, we have a really small school, so like they provide a snack, but you get a 10-minute break in between. But yeah, definitely bring your own pens or pencils. Some teachers provide it. Like I know a lot of teachers are giving their kids stuff. But yeah, and then they provide all the other stuff. You're going to get a lot of booklets and papers and stuff tomorrow. How to create a good argument database. So I have my kids like make an actual like argument database, and it's like this chart thing that I have them do. I think I linked it in one of my most recent videos. But I tell them to rely on what they know, like stuff that they're already knowledgeable about, and really kind of balance out like current examples, historical examples, things like that. I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but that's kind of how my students do it. Oh, thank you for the hearts over on TikTok. Can you explain rhetorical analysis? Okay. Yes, but if you need help with rhetorical analysis, please go to my YouTube channel, Coach Hall Writes, because I have tons of videos about that. But basically, you're looking for rhetorical choices and how it relates to message, argument, or purpose. So what is the person purposely doing and why are they doing it? That's like the shortest definition of rhetorical analysis I could give. Can I use fake statistics in your argument essay? I wouldn't, because honestly, we kind of know they're fake, so I wouldn't bother to make it up if I were you. It sounds like cheesy. Because when students are like 88% of blah blah blah, like just no, we know you're making it up, so it kind of you like lose credibility. So just I would recommend not doing that. I keep scoring 50% for multiple choice. Is that okay for a 3-4 if I score okay on the essays? Okay, so let's talk about scoring for a second. Okay. If you want to make a 3 composite, if you can answer approximately 50% of the multiple choice and make a 4 out of 6 on your essays, you should get a 3. The way it works is each multiple choice question is worth 1 point. The essays, they're going to take the score that you get and they multiply it by, I think it's like 3.0556. So all of that, like the maximum amount of points is 100. So hold on, I wrote it down somewhere. I don't know if I still have it. Okay, I do. It's somehow on my floor. It's on a Post-it note. So forgive me as I look to the side. A 5 is going to be approximately 73 to 100 points. A 6 is approximately 63 to 72 points, and a 3 is approximately 52 to 62 points. So if you have done some like practice tests, figure out how many multiple choice you normally get, right? Let's say you get 24 right. That's 24 points. And then take your essay scores. Let's say you make all 4 out of 6s, then that's 12 points. Multiply that by 3.0556, and that'll tell you approximately how many points you get and that kind of thing. So that's like a quick run through of what that looks like. Someone said my school needs ID. Okay, great. Thank you for answering that, because I don't think our students do. Or if they do, like our AP coordinator handles it. Okay, let me answer a couple over on TikTok. Do you need a conclusion? No, you do not. The conclusion is like the first thing to go. Do I need anecdotes and a synthesis or other evidence, or can it all be from the documents? Yeah, you don't need outside info. You can include it, but you like they want you to like use the sources basically. So like make sure you have 3 sources for synthesis. But yeah, like if you have like a relevant personal anecdote that would help your commentary, go for it, but you don't need to. Do you recommend an open thesis or a closed thesis? This is such a loaded question for teachers in the AP Lang teacher community. I recommend for exam purposes a closed thesis. That just means that you're very explicit and you say like your main points in your thesis. It doesn't have to be super on the nose. But there you can write a good closed thesis. Some teachers don't like it because in college for longer papers, you write an open thesis. These are viewed as a rough draft and you only have 40 minutes to write the essay. So I say for tomorrow, do a closed thesis. What do I do if I run out of time? Pacing is super important. So for multiple choice, try not to spend more than 35 minutes on the reading. Those are going to be the first 2 passages. And then about 25 minutes on the writing. Those are the last 3 passages if you're taking it in order. Because you don't want to linger too long on any one particular question for multiple choice. For the writing, you can start with any essay question you want to. Most students start with synthesis. So I would kind of plan out tonight. You have 2 hours and 15 minutes. Plan out how long you intend to spend on each essay. You get a 15-minute reading period at the beginning. You can start writing during that time. So most of my students, their plan is 10 minutes to read and plan synthesis and 40 to write. They're going to do about 40 to 45 minutes with rhetorical analysis and 35 to 40 minutes with argument. That's kind of their plan. But some of my students who are better at argument, they're doing their essays, synthesis, argument, and then rhetorical analysis in that order. So you can do them in any order. How do you tell how much time has passed? Your testing room is supposed to have a clock, and you are allowed to wear a watch as long as it's just like a regular, like not a smartwatch. So it can't send or receive messages. So like no Fitbits, no Apple Watches, but it can be like a really cheap watch. A lot of my students went and bought really cheap watches at Walmart. If you have a Walmart near you, I'm sure like other stores are similar, but we have a Walmart down the street from the school. And they bought like the kids' watches. Like one has a Paw Patrol watch. One has like Groot from whatever that movie is. I'm blanking right now. It's not Avengers. What is Groot from? Guardians of the Galaxy. Is that right? Anyway, Groot. Someone had like a unicorn one. Someone had like Jojo Siwa. Like they're like $5 at Walmart. So you can get a really cheap watch. I don't know if you can do it before tomorrow for the test, but if you know somebody who has a watch that's like not a smartwatch, you can ask them maybe to borrow it or something to keep track of time. But you're supposed to have a clock in your room. Like it's supposed to be visible for everybody, I think. What is the difference between synthesis and argument essays? The synthesis, they give you sources. The argument, they don't. Is the commentary point earned the same way for each essay? Sort of, yes. Like commentary is always the why. So in that sense, yes. The rubrics like from essay to essay are really similar. Like they have slight variations because of the task, but they're pretty simple. or similar, sorry. How many multiple choice will get me a 5? Try for 70 to 80%, I would say. What's the difference between argumentative and explanatory synthesis? I've never heard anyone call it explanatory synthesis, so I'm not totally sure. But synthesis is sources and argument is not. Tips for analyzing the text for the rhetorical essay. I wish they gave you better margins in the College Board prompts, but like you can write in the margin, just write down observations like of the choices that they're making, read the passage. If they ask you about message or argument, look for what their message or argument is. And I would say just kind of break it down chronologically. What are they doing in the beginning, the middle, and end? Those don't have to be even sections, but I would read the passage first just to get the gist of it, make any annotations that you want to, and then go back and say, okay, this is what I consider the beginning. Here's what they're doing. This is the middle. Here's what they're doing. And then the end, and here's what they're doing. And I would then figure out, okay, these are the choices that I want to write about. And then start from there. Can you write on the test papers? Okay, so I think so. It kind of depends on what you're asking. For multiple choice, you're going to get like a booklet that has all the multiple choice questions in it. One thing, if you haven't seen this before, it's kind of helpful, but kind of annoying. They'll print the passage, let's say on like the left page, and then you have your questions on the right. When you flip the page, they reprint the passage. So like, let's say you have questions 1 through 4, and then you flip the page, it's 5 through 9, but they apparently they like reprint the passage. So like if you annotate, like you have to go back to your annotations, but it also helps that you don't have to, if you don't, then you don't have to keep flipping. I don't know. Some of my students hate it. Some of them think it's a lot more helpful. So I don't know, but you can write in that booklet. You're also going to get a bubble sheet, and that's where you actually put your answers. You're going to get a booklet of your FRQ or stuff, like your sources. All your essays are together. You can write in that any notes that you want, and then you have your exam booklet for your essays. So yeah, you can annotate on the stuff, and it's fine. They don't count that for anything, but yeah, you can. How much time for multiple choice? You have 1 hour to answer 45 questions. Which essay should I use outside information on? Well, definitely argument, because there are no sources. But you can use outside information for like your intro or conclusion on synthesis, technically rhetorical analysis. If you know outside information, it's not always guaranteed. Sometimes the person is like, or the event that they're talking about is really obscure though. Let's see. Can I use the format for the ACT essay on argumentative essay? I haven't looked at the ACT argument in a while, to be honest with you, because my kids take the ACT, but very few of them take it with the essay. It is an argument essay though. I know what you're talking about. They don't structure it the same way, but like, yes, for AP Lang, you want a thesis, and then you want body paragraphs with evidence and commentary. So if that's what you would do for ACT, then yeah. Let's see. Sorry, I've been ignoring TikTok for a second, though a lot of the questions are the same. Let's see. What does an outline look like? I like to outline like my thesis. You don't have to write out the whole thesis, but I would put like my argument, and then I like to figure out like what my main ideas are. So I might put like what my main idea is, and then like a bullet point of the examples that I want to bring up, so I can like keep track of that. So I do like really simple outlines, but I like to outline my thesis and then my main ideas, especially. Let's see. Thank you to everybody who's like answering each other's questions in the chats too. Do you list out your devices in your thesis? Yeah, you can. Try for Q2. Try to use verbs if at all possible. But yes, you can. That's a closed thesis, but it's totally fine. How can I maximize points on the argumentative? The biggest thing for all your essays is the commentary. But make sure you have specific examples for the argument essay. So don't generalize. That's the big thing. Can my conclusion sentence... Oh, I lost it. It was something about conclusion sentences. What transition should you use in the beginning of your thesis? You don't necessarily need a transition in the beginning of your thesis. I don't know. What should be in the intro for rhetorical analysis? Clarify who the speaker and audience are. if there's a specific occasion, like just the rhetorical situation in general. The most important part of the rhetorical analysis intro is your thesis. And to be defensible, you need choices and message, purpose, or argument. Okay, someone on TikTok asked a question about concluding sentences, and I was going to answer it and then I like lost it. And so if you asked that question, would you just like put it back in the chat for me? I'll try to answer it again. But a conclusion sentence is helpful. So you want to wrap up your body paragraph and tie back to your thesis. So you can use the word therefore. Can my conclusion be one sentence for every essay? Oh, okay. It was that's what it was. Yes. I consider one sentence conclusions weak and unnecessary, but yes, you can do it. And I don't mean that in like an offensive way. I feel like they just kind of are like blah, because it's usually just a summary of what you just said, but that's neither here nor there. But a concluding sentence is the end of your paragraph. Use the word like therefore or thus to remind the person of the main point you were just trying to prove. It seems formulaic, but that can be really helpful. Will you lose points for restating the prompt? Not necessarily. Try not to restate it word for word, but like, okay, let's take argument, for instance. They might ask you, like last year, it was the value of striving for perfection. You can use that phrase in your thesis in your essay. In fact, you probably should. So it's okay to say like, striving for perfection is valuable because of this and this. That's okay. Like that's using the words, but like that's allowed. That's totally fine. Can you get a 5 on a prompt with only a thesis and yes. And 2 body paragraphs? Yes, you can. Let's see. For rhetorical analysis, how many quotes or evidence is required for each body paragraph? It's kind of a difficult question because like I'd say the minimum is 2. But like some students use really like short quotes and they weave it into multiple sentences. So they might actually have like a lot of little quotes, but I would say a minimum of 2 quotes. If I had to like simplify it, then a minimum of 2 quotes per paragraph is what I'd say. How do you go about synthesis? I read this. Okay, so obviously read the prompt. Turn the prompt into a question, like figure out what they're asking you to write about. As I'm annotating the sources, I try to look for connections between the sources. So like, if source A is like, okay, let's say you get to source C and you're like, oh, this is kind of similar to source A. Put a little note on your paper that says like, similar to source A or talks about blah, 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 and then put source A. That way you start to realize like how you can pair them together. Or if it contradicts each other, like you could put like contradicts source D, and some people make like a chart too. I think that works. But basically you want to start to figure out like, they could ask you about like the role of something. So figure out like what's the value of it, or why is it helpful, or why is it maybe not useful. They could ask you about factors. So factors are things like financial factors or aesthetics, like what it looks like, or economical factors. So just kind of keep track of those things as you are reading. And I think that kind of streamlines the process. What's the definition between explanation and significance following textual evidence? Okay. I think so. You want to explain the significance of the evidence. So like, meaning like, why is the evidence important? What does it prove? Or like reveal? How does it prove your thesis? Basically like answering why and so what. Okay, so I just answered the what's the best way to approach synthesis, or at least I told you my way. I'm not saying it's the best way. Is it worth writing an intro and a conclusion? Yes. Well, okay. I think you should have an intro because I think you need a thesis, and I think it makes sense for a rough draft, which is essentially what these are, to just put it in the beginning of your essay. Because it tells the reader what you're trying to prove and it keeps you on track. Conclusions are not necessary. You can just write a thesis as your intro. I've seen kids do it and it still scores well. Okay, sophistication. The biggest thing is, I think, is trying to situate the issue in a broader context. So making real world connections. You can also go back through and look at your style. So use adverbs or adjectives to like, instead of just saying like he describes, like maybe you could say like he vividly describes. Excuse me. That would be for sophistication. You could also vary your punctuation. Like use dashes and colons, semicolons. Don't overdo it, but sometimes that like vary your syntax. But sophistication is super hard. Like it's so rare. It's I'm not saying it's not worth trying for, but like the biggest concern right now, especially if you rarely or never get the sophistication point, your biggest concern should be your evidence and commentary. And for what it's worth, you can get a 5 composite without getting the sophistication point. Like point wise anyway. Do you need a specific or number of rhetorical choices? I think at least 2. Advice for multiple choice. Pace yourself. Don't spend too long on any one particular question. Use process of elimination. You don't necessarily have to annotate a lot, but like really make sure that you are looking at what the question's actually asking. Some of the questions are going to look at like specific parts of the passage, like a certain like paragraph or line. Those are usually a little easier to answer quickly. Some are going to be about the passage as a whole. So that would be something to consider as well. Can you go live in the morning? Possibly. I'm not a morning person. I would rather stay up super late than have to wake up early. Plus, I got to get to school to get my own students ready for the exam, and I have to drop my little ones off at pre-K. But I'm not making any promises. If I could get ready and go and do live, I would, but like I'm not that level of a TikToker or a YouTuber. That would be so weird. Get ready with me, AP Teacher Edition. I don't think no one would care. Exigence questions. I don't know what that means, but they can ask you about exigence in the multiple choice. I've seen it happen a couple times. They'll say like, what is the exigence of the piece? So exigence, if you're familiar with Space Cat, you know what exigence is, but exigence is just like the catalyst or like the impetus. It's like why they like spoke or like wrote the letter or the article. So they could ask you about that. So that's a good word to know. A couple other words that like might come up on multiple choice. And again, no promises. They might ask about something about like colloquial language. So colloquial language is like kind of like slang. It's like common language. Trying to think. I made a list once of words that came up on multiple choice tests, but then they like changed the test. So then like my list is probably obsolete by now. For transition word questions, if you don't know what subsequently means, it just means after. That was one of the answer choices for something that my students did on AP Classroom a couple weeks ago. And then other transition words, moreover means furthermore. So those are a couple words that just you should know. Also concession. If you concede something, it's a concession. It's just like when you acknowledge the merit of the other side, like you acknowledge the good about it. Let's see. All right. If you are finding this valuable, go ahead and give some hearts or a thumbs up on whatever platform you're on. That'd be super helpful. Let's see. Is it bad to APUSH style the synthesis? Thank you for the hearts. Okay, so there are differences between APUSH and synthesis, but like in general, there is some overlap. I am not an expert on APUSH, so I don't want to like mislead you. But what you said about like intro, 3-body, counter, conclusion, I think that's a lot to do for an AP. Like I almost think that's too much for synthesis. Intro, yes, 2 to 3 body paragraphs. Counterclaim is not necessary, but it can be helpful. Conclusion is not necessary, but it can be helpful. I think the AP Lang test is more forgiving than the APUSH test. And I think I could be wrong. If anyone's taken both, let me know. What's the format of the exam? Oh, thank you for the hearts over on YouTube as well. The format of the exam tomorrow when your exam starts, which I believe is 8 a.m. your local time. You're going to have 1 hour of multiple choice. There will be 5 passages, 2 reading, 3 writing. So you'll answer all 45 questions in 1 hour. Please do not leave any blank, even if you are guessing. Guess A or D for all I care. It doesn't matter. C is actually not the most common answer choice all the time. I know it's like urban legend, but do not leave anything blank. You're supposed to get a 10-minute break. That's when you can use the restroom. Some schools provide a snack. Then after the 10 minutes, you go back in for your FRQs, which is your free response. You get 2 hours and 15 minutes total to answer all 3 essays. You can do them in any order you want to. And before they start the test, there's like, okay, I swear it takes like 20 minutes, but they tell you all the exam stuff. So there's lots of like, the proctor talks to you at the beginning. So like it starts at 8 a.m., but you probably won't start your multiple choice for like 15 to 20 minutes ish. I have to proctor one of our tests on Friday. So let's see. How many writing passages? For the multiple choice, there's 3 writing multiple choice passages. If you're talking about the essays, there's also 3 essays. Multiple choice is pencil, yes. I would bring like regular like lead pencils, not mechanical pencils. Your essays have to be in pen. So blue or black ink, choose some kind of ink that's not going to bleed. Because like I love like this, like the Flair pens. I would not write an essay in this because it like bleeds through sometimes. So just choose like a normal pen. Some schools provide the pens for you. Are you a reader? Or will you be a reader in June? Yes, I will. I did it last year online, and this year I get to go to Tampa. I'm super excited, and not that any of you care, but we're turning it into a family vacation. So I get to take my 4-year-old to Disney, and he gets to meet Buzz and Woody for the first time. And like, he doesn't fully understand what's happening, but I am super excited for him. Oh, okay. So the Intrepid Dabbler, I probably said that wrong. The Intrepid Dabbler, I will see you there. All right, cool. I'm nervous about the in-person reading, to be honest with you, because it is exhausting. Like online last year, I think I read like almost 800 essays, and like, I am nervous about being in person. It's fun. You learn a lot as a teacher, but it's a lot of reading. Hi, Carly. If this is the Carly that I think it is, I will see you tomorrow during first period. And then after first period, Carly will probably be making TikToks in between classes. Let's see. 800 is hard. Yeah, 800 is hard to read. I've heard people read like 1200. I thought I was like decently quick, but some people read like way more than I did. All right, let's see. Oh, Carly's going to talk about it in first period tomorrow. All right, what does it mean by 3 reading and 2 writing? So reading passages are comprehension. So it's going to be like kind of like the questions where it's like, what is the function of this paragraph, or what is the point of this passage? It's testing your comprehension skills. The writing passages are more like editing. Those are going to say this is a draft. And they're going to ask you about transition words, possibly like topic sentences, adding and deleting sentences. To put it broadly, if you've taken the ACT or the SAT, the reading multiple choice on the AP Lang exam is kind of like the reading on those tests. There are some differences. It's not exactly the same, but it's very similar. So if you've already studied for the SAT, you kind of know that kind of thing, or ACT. For the writing multiple choice, it's similar to some of the ACT English questions or the SAT writing and language questions. You're not going to be asked about like commas and semicolons and all that, but it's more of like the questions that have a question stem above it, where it's like what's the best word to use here, or the writer wants to add this sentence, should they do so, kind of thing. Someone said they're scared for tomorrow. Just be confident in yourselves. You've been like training or like studying all year. So it's going to be okay. And no matter how hard it seems, seriously, like they take all these things into consideration. So don't get defeated before you actually like finish your test, and don't walk out of the room being like, I failed. Like, try your hardest while you're in there. Keep writing. I think it's important to just use your whole time that you have to, like, multiple choice. Some kids finish early, and I don't think it's wise to second guess yourself on multiple choice. They say that like your first instinct is always right. I don't know if that's always true, but like for the writing, like you get 2 hours and 15 minutes for 3 essays. There's always something that you can be doing. But don't be nervous. Like, I know that's like, it's easy for me to say as a teacher, but like you can do this. Bare minimum to get a 3 on rhetorical. If you mean a 3 out of 6, then you need a thesis. You need to provide evidence, and you need some commentary. So I like to have kids use synonyms of the word shows. So illustrates, highlights, suggests, that kind of thing. Now, if you're talking about like really a 3 in row B, make sure that you're connecting the choice to the rhetorical situation. So ask yourself, why are they making this choice for this audience on this occasion? And also talk about how it helps them with their message, argument, or purpose. What are some rhetorical terms we can use in our thesis? Common rhetorical choices or devices, however you want to look at it, would be things like comparison, contrast, repetition, examples, anecdotes. Those are probably some of the most common ones, but it doesn't have to be those things. Ask yourself, what is the writer doing? And it can be more broad than that. Can we pass the class even if we fail the exam? At my school, yes. Your exam scores won't come out until June. So my understanding is it should not have any bearing on the grade in your class. Obviously, like different schools have different policies, but you won't get your scores. Oh, wait, did I say June? It might be July. No, because we read in June. Strike that. I misspoke. It's July. You won't get your scores until July. So it shouldn't have any bearing on your, like, you can get a GPA boost. Like at our school, if you sit for the exam, regardless of your score, you can get a 5.0 instead of a 4.0. Can you explain parallelism? Parallelism is like kind of like repetition. Like I just tell my kids to analyze repetition and not parallelism, but it's just like when they use the same phrasing throughout and it creates like a rhythm or a cadence and it helps them emphasize that particular point or that particular phrase. It's pretty common in speeches. It happens throughout different types of writing, but because speeches are spoken, repetition helps because people are hearing the repetition, so it sinks in more. Syntax is sentence structure. So that's like how they compose the sentence, like how they punctuate it and how they have their clauses and things like that. Do I need to use logos, ethos, pathos? Touchy subject, kind of. Please, this is just my opinion. Please do not write a paragraph about logos, ethos, or pathos in and of itself if you can avoid it. Last year I saw several essays that it was like, here's a paragraph about logos, ethos, pathos. It's not, I'm not saying don't write about the appeals, but remember that choices create appeals. So if you see that something is logical, ask yourself, why is it logical? Is it because they're giving you facts and statistics? Is it because they're giving you examples? If so, that's what you really want to focus on. So you can talk about what makes the logical appeal. You could say like so-and-so uses the statistic of blah, blah, blah to logically assert that, whatever. If it's pathos, tell us which emotion, if you're going to use that. But look for like imagery, detail, description, the different word choice, possibly examples. That makes the emotional appeal usually. Credibility is usually like first person, like I, me, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I have a whole video on that if you want more information. If you normally write about logos, ethos, pathos, I'm not saying you can't, but if you type in like Coach Hall writes rhetorical appeals, I have a video on that. A semicolon it joins two independent clauses or complete sentences. You don't need to know what it is for the exam, like that. They're not going to ask you that. Please keep the live stream up after it's done. It should go like on my channel, so don't worry. I have a few recent lives, but yeah, this will be up. How do I choose the best evidence on synthesis? Look for statistics and facts, and if they give you examples of like when it was successful and when it wasn't. Those are things that I feel like you should pay attention to. They might give you lots of statistics and stuff. So obviously choose the ones that best suit the points that you're trying to make. But like if you use the like facts and statistics and examples that they provide to support your claims, it makes a more logical argument. How many pages should each essay be? It kind of depends on your handwriting, but I would say if you're writing front and back, at least one front and back. Like if it's just a front and like half, like especially if your handwriting is big, that's usually not developed enough. I'm just making a generalization here, but like I have a lot of students who do like 2 pages front and back, so like 4 sides, I guess. It really just depends. I have one student who writes Like, he has really small handwriting, and it at best he gets one page like front and back. But like I told him that even though he's really concise, because I know him, I worry about like how other people would interpret his essay. I've given his essays to other readers to just double check that I like, because it's different when it's your own student. But like my biggest fear for him is that he's so concise that like he's not going to have enough commentary. So that would be my thing, is like make sure you have enough commentary. What is a good structure for thesis statements? It depends on which one you're talking about, but for rhetorical analysis, make sure that you have choices and then message, argument, or purpose. For synthesis and argument, just like I tend to teach my students a closed thesis for test day, which just means that they tell their main points. So you can turn the prompt into a question, and you can basically say like let's take last year's prompt, the value of striving for perfection. So striving for perfection is valuable because it leads to this and this. Or you can do a counter argument thesis, which is a little bit more advanced. So it's like, although striving for perfection can be blank, like let's say negative, and you explain like what you mean by that. It can also be blank, and you can because, and like, so you kind of do like the counter argument there. I have videos about that on my channel if you want more information. Would you recommend doing the writing MCQs first or the reading? It depends. If you have taken a full-length multiple choice test from like AP Classroom, your teacher could print it out or assign it on there. If you are noticeably better at the writing questions and you find that you run out of time if you start with the reading, then I would say start with those first. If you have plenty of time to finish, or you're equally good at both of them, then I would just say take it in order. The reason why some people start with the writing multiple choice questions first is if they're stronger at it, they want to make sure they're not going to run out of time. Just if you do that, please make sure that you are matching up the question that you're answering to the right bubble on the bubble sheet, because if you mess that up, it could be really detrimental. What are good examples of hooks? For rhetorical analysis, you can use like a universal truth. I find that like hooks are not, like I used to think hooks are necessary because that's what I was taught. But like the more I've taught, I kind of feel like because it's a rough draft and you only have 40 minutes, they're not super necessary. For synthesis, you can kind of, I guess, like sort of talk about both sides of the issue, or like the context of it, like why the issue is important, maybe. So yeah, there's not like a best way, but there are ways to do that. How to improve with multiple choice. Use process of elimination, and look for like obviously like the best answer choice, but like choose answer choices that are precise and that are actually answering the question. If it's really difficult and you're not sure, if you've narrowed it down to 2, make your best guess. If you are totally not sure, or if you're running out of time, at least bubble in an answer for everything. Please do not leave anything, like any question unanswered tomorrow for multiple choice. Because at worst case scenario, let's say it's a total guess, there are 5 answer choices, so you can get a 20% chance of getting it right just by guessing. So please do not leave anything blank. Be mindful of your time, because the person proctoring your exam is supposed to help you keep track of time, but like don't rely on somebody else. Like have a watch if you can, but like keep track of time. Rhetorical devices and analyzing articles. So whether it's an article, a speech, or a letter, like the approach is still the same. So ask yourself, like, what are they doing and why are they doing it? Are you allowed to mention rhetorical devices in your rhetorical analysis essay? Yes. They say rhetorical choices, but like a rhetorical choice is a verb. A rhetorical device is a noun. You can use the nouns, the devices in your essay. You're not going to lose points. It's fine. We prefer verbs, but like it's fine. Will using a counter argument give you the sophistication point? It is not guaranteed. If it were that simple, then everybody would do it. It has to be like a nuanced argument or like a really effective one. Are the actual MCQ more like the classroom or Barron's? There's a huge difference. Oh, it's like AP Classroom is way better than Barron's, because AP Classroom is actually like the AP people making it. Barron's, I don't, I don't like their book. I tutored somebody who had that book, and she like got like I did like an official practice with her from the College Board that's on their like course exam description, and she made a really good score. And then she did Barron's, and it was a lot worse, and she was like really upset. And so she started reading me the questions, and I was like, that is not how the College Board would phrase it. So not to knock Barron's, like Barron's don't come for me. But Barron's is not what I would purchase. If you've already bought it, like that's fine. But if you are struggling with Barron's, like don't stress about it. How much evidence do we need for each of the essays for them to be scored well? Okay, if I'm understanding your question and I'm trying to answer it like without like, I don't know, it's just a generalization, but at least 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. What do you think about Princeton Review? I think Princeton Review is probably better than Barron's. I think one of my students, my tutoring students this year, used Princeton Review, and I think it was a little bit better. I think she did. I'll have to ask her to clarify. There were 2 questions that she got wrong because we were going over them. There were 2 that I was like, that is not how they would ask it. But I think it was better than Barron's. Yeah, I think Barron's is a good publisher for other topics. I just don't think that like their AP Lang stuff right now is top notch, but like it could improve in the future. So much homework the night before the exam. Well, if you don't have those classes tomorrow because of the test, can you at least put off the homework? I wish teachers wouldn't assign homework for other classes when they know you have an AP test. I tried to be really mindful of that because all my students, not all, most of my students had a push on Friday. So I made sure that they didn't have homework. To be fair, I rarely assign homework, but I gave them like a couple things before the exam. Do we really need an intro paragraph? No, you just need a thesis if you want to cut down on some stuff. How should I approach the passages for MCQ? You can annotate if you want to. Wow, Kenneth is really wanting me to answer that question on YouTube. You can annotate if you want to. I would say definitely read the provided info above the passage. They'll usually tell you I think it's italicized. It might be bolded, but I want to say it's italicized. It is like, it'll tell you like this speech was from like this year, and like this is a 1908 speech about women's rights or something like that. Like they'll tell you that. So make sure you read that because it does kind of help as far as like knowing the context of it. And I would say as you're reading, be mindful of like, what's the subject? So figure out like, what are we talking about in this passage? What's their tone? And kind of pay attention to major shifts if they happen, things like that. Sorry, I got something in my throat. Let's see. Okay, the chat's moving kind of quickly, so I was trying to answer. Oh, a lot of people are wondering about like tips for like old passages. I wish I knew because they used to have this like format of like they gave us like certain time periods. They more recently, it seems like the stuff's been more contemporary, so I'm hoping they don't give you anything old, but like I can't promise. Don't get hung up on any one particular word because a lot of times with older passages, some of the word choice is kind of confusing. So you can use like context clues and stuff, but if you don't understand a word, just keep reading because chances are it'll become clear as you go. So yeah, don't get hung up on that. And like some of the words like in phrases they use, like they just don't say it the way we would, but you can still figure it out. They're trying to make things more accessible though. So I highly doubt that they'll give you a rhetorical analysis from that time period, but maybe they would. I don't want to jinx anyone, so I'm not going to put that out into the universe. But I would just say, like, if it's really confusing, take it step by step. Like, take it one paragraph at a time and kind of look at it at a paragraph level and ask yourself, okay, what did that just say? That's what helps me. I'm afraid I don't know many rhetorical choices. That's okay. Just ask yourself what they're doing. I have like a video on my channel from like 2 years ago. I literally made it like the day of the exam because I had so many requests for it. And it's like most common rhetorical devices or choices. So that video might help. I probably need to update that one. Do you get a break between the 2 sections? Yes, you get a 10-minute break. Or at least you're supposed to. I'm pretty sure it's 10 minutes. Can you still achieve a 4 out of 4 on evidence and commentary with only 2 well-developed body paragraphs? Absolutely. There is nothing that says you need 3. How do you come up with a defensible thesis for RA essays? I have a video about this on my channel. So if you want to watch that video, type in Coach Hollowright's rhetorical analysis thesis. But long story short, you need rhetorical choices and message, purpose, or arguments. How can we make sure we're doing commentary right? Use the word because, and then use verbs like highlights, illustrates, suggests. For rhetorical analysis, explain why they made that choice for that audience on that occasion. Like, why did they make that choice? Like, how is it helping their argument or their message? For synthesis and arguments, trying to think. For commentary, ask yourself, like, what is, like, why does it matter? Like, so what? Like, what does it show us? You can use different verbs than show, but that is the same thing. Someone said, if I get a 5, it's because of you. Well, thank you. Yeah. If you guys get good scores, feel free to come back to the channel and put comments. People will do that kind of like each year. They'll say like, you know, hey, I got this or that. But yeah, best of luck tomorrow. Seriously, like just trust yourself and do the best you can. But it's always nice to hear when people who watch my videos have gotten scores that they were happy with. Should you have a conclusion for sophistication? You do not need one. It can help for sophistication, but it's not guaranteed. Any ideas of where to get evidence for the argumentative essay? The acronym I use is CHORES: current events, history, outside knowledge, reading, experience, and science. Other teachers use like Read Hugo and other stuff. It doesn't matter. They all mean the same thing. Rely on what you know well. So personal experience is okay to write about. Current events is fine. Like historical events, like if you've studied for APUSH already and you took that exam, or if you're taking AP World, like you know a lot of historical knowledge that you could perhaps repurpose. It really just depends on the prompt. So I would say if you're trying to like study tonight, pick a couple topics that you know well and just make sure that you like have all the concrete data about. But like you don't know what the prompt is going to be, so it is kind of hard to predict. But like I usually tell my students to try to know like a couple important historical figures and events, just in case. If we write about personal experience, can we use I? Yes, if you're writing about personal experience and argument or synthesis, it's okay to use I because it's your experience. So we don't want you to say stuff like I think or I believe or in my opinion. But if you're writing about personal experience, you can. Does the conclusion really matter to your score? No, it does not. What are the Q1, Q2, and Q3? The first question that you'll encounter for the essays is synthesis. That's Q1. That's the one with all the sources. Q2 is rhetorical analysis. That's the passage where it's usually a speech, but it could be an article, it could be a letter, it could be an excerpt of a nonfiction book. So that's question 2. Question 3 is the argument that may or may not have a quote and then a prompt. You do not need to repeat the quote or respond to the quote. It's just to kind of give you like somebody's perspective on it. And it's usually an abstract concept, but it doesn't have to be. My teacher suggested that we fabricate personal experiences. If you can do it convincingly, okay. I mean, I don't know. That's on you. I don't know. I mean, if you have no other strategy, I guess it's fine. Tips on rhetorical analysis. So many. The biggest thing as a reader last year, the biggest thing was that like students were not connecting the choice to the message, argument, or purpose. That was like the biggest thing is like they would tell us like, okay, here's what they do. And then like, here's some evidence. And then they like, oh, they did it to emphasize this, but they didn't say why, like why for that audience on that occasion. But rhetorical analysis is my specialty. So if you want more videos on that, I have like a whole playlist on my channel. I actually just uploaded a video today that was like 8 quick tips for rhetorical analysis. Can you fill out the FRQ out of order? Yes. Play to your strengths. If you are like really good at rhetorical analysis and you want to do that first, go for it. If you think it's your worst essay and you want to do it last, that's fine. You can do it in any order you want to. And like, if you finish an essay early, like let's say you think, oh, I don't have time for a conclusion, leave, like if you're at the bottom of a page, leave a page space so you can go back and add more if you want to, if you have time. There's going to be like bubbles at the top of your page. At least last year there were. which makes so much more sense. It used to be a box and you'd write like Q1, Q2, Q3 in the box, but now you just bubble it in. So they'll know which essay it is. And also the essays are so different. Like it's not hard for us to figure out which one it was. Does identifying more unique rhetorical devices help with the sophistication point? No, not necessarily. Some of the essays that have gotten the sophistication point have written about like common things. They just did it in an insightful way. How do I make synthesis sound less like a research paper? Don't worry about it sounding like a research paper because that's honestly kind of what it is. So I wouldn't worry about that. My teacher told me the more you write, the better. I tend to believe that because, I mean, I suppose there could be a point where everything's like super redundant, but like, yes, like I think that's kind of true. Is the sophistication point worth trying for 95% of students? No. Let's see. Let me answer a couple over on YouTube. Is it possible for me to pass the exam if I rely on multiple choice to carry me through? Technically, yeah. It depends on what we're talking about. But there's essentially 100 total points. The multiple choice is like 1 point each. So if you're really strong on multiple choice, build a cushion there and gain as many points as you can. And then for your essays, you want to try to shoot for ideally a 4 out of 6. But if you get like really good multiple choice, but like a 3 out of 6 on a couple essays, it could balance out. But getting a 3 out of 6 should not be super difficult because you need a thesis, you need evidence, and then you need some commentary. So use like shows and because, and you should be able to at least hopefully get a 3 if that's what you're going for. If you can't do an intro, just skip to thesis. Yes, that's absolutely true. A long intro does not really benefit you for these types of essays. A good thesis for rhetorical analysis, choices, and purpose. For argument, just make sure it's clear what side you're taking. You can do a counter argument thesis for synthesis and argument. Those tend to read more nicely, in my opinion, but they're not necessary. How do you cite sources? Do not say, if you can avoid it, do not say according to source A. Say like according to, and then tell us like the source, like according to an article in the New York Times, or like according to a 2017 Forbes article, or according to so-and-so, a leading expert on this. Like use the person's credentials from the original source. Or you don't even need to lead into it that way. You can embed it into a sentence of your own. Put the parenthetical citation at the end. So when you're citing something, put it in parentheses at the end of your sentence. Even if you lead into it with like, according to so-and-so, still put the citation. My teacher said you can use a source letter because it doesn't matter. Well, yeah, you can cite it as a parenthetical, but in your essay, if you write according to source A as like your lead in, it seems really cheesy. People do it all the time. It seems cheesy. Timing for multiple choice. Don't linger too long on any one particular question. Try not to spend more than 35 minutes on the reading, which is the first 2 passages, so that you have about 25 minutes for the writing. You do not need a full intro, but you should have a thesis. Good intro for a synthesis. Usually like a couple sentences about like the issue or like the context of the issue, and then a thesis. How can I stop writing vaguely? Add adverbs and adjectives to make your writing more precise, and make sure you're using specific evidence. And then like another vague thing that we see a lot is like limited commentary. So that would be like just like really general stuff. Like for rhetorical analysis, it's when people say like paints a picture in the reader's mind, or like that's kind of vague. So you can be more precise there. Let me see. Should we do synthesis first? I would play to your strengths. Most students do synthesis first because it's the most time consuming, but you technically don't have to. Thank you for doing this review. You're so welcome. Honestly, like I don't even feel tired, but my neck is killing me. It's like really stiff. So if I keep like twisting my head, it's because it's like stretching out my neck. So sorry if that's like weird. Can we use we in synthesis? You can, if you're actually like, instead of saying we, you probably mean like society or like people or individuals, as opposed to like we. And then rhetorical analysis, no, you shouldn't use we unless you're trying to connect it to a broader context. But like honestly, anytime you could use we, I would just say like society or people or individuals instead. It will sound better. What's the difference between writing and reading MCQ? Reading is comprehension. Writing is more like editing. Yeah, multiple choice has like two answers that seem right, a distractor, and one that's obviously wrong. So yeah, there's one that's like better than the other, but like there's two that seem right. How to add examples for argument. Really focus on stuff that you can speak about or write about knowledgeably, current events, history. Even if you write about like TV shows or books, as long as you're writing about it confidently, you should be okay. I've had kids write about like sports and stuff and music, and they did great because like they knew a lot about it. Someone said, I better get a Q3 prompt that is good. That Q3 is the one that makes me the most nervous because like some prompts that they've done in the past have been great, and some of them have been like, not that they're bad, but they're just like, oh. Can you lie about specific details? They won't know. They don't fact check you. Like they don't like Google stuff. So like I suppose if you're gonna lie, make sure it's convincing. Don't make up statistics though. That's like usually a red flag because we know that you probably didn't memorize that. So like, don't make up stuff like statistics. What are the rhetorical devices we should avoid? Well, it's the appeals, but like logos, ethos, pathos. It's not that you can't write about them, but write about the choice that's creating the appeal instead. Because like when I see essays where it's like, here's a paragraph about logos and here's ethos and here's pathos, that just shows that like a lack of understanding of like rhetorical analysis. But I read several essays like that last year. Do you need to mention rhetorical choices you'll mention later inside your... Most people do. Most people mention their rhetorical choices in their thesis, or they might keep it like more broad. Like, so for instance, I was working with a student on Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena speech. And like, instead of saying like repetition or something like that, they said like he criticizes those who blah, 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 and then he praises those. Those were the two major movements they were looking at. And then in the body paragraphs, they talked about like word choice and other stuff. So like it's a choice is what they're doing. So if you say criticizes or praises, that counts as a choice. So it was more open-ended, but then they talked about other things like how did he criticize? Well, it was in his harsh word choice kind of thing. What order do you recommend for the essays? How should we time ourselves? Do the essays in the order that you feel is your strongest. Most people start with synthesis, but prioritize the essays that you think are your best. Save your worst for last, because I feel like this is just me, but like I feel like for me, argument would be the worst. So I would save it for last because like I'm probably gonna get the same score in like 30 minutes and 40 minutes. Like, whereas rhetorical analysis, like that's my strength. So I might be able to get like, if I'm going for that sophistication point, if I just had 5 more minutes, maybe I could kind of thing. That's just my thought, but like everybody is different, I guess. But I would save your worst essay for last. If you're equally good at all of them or like just equal at all of them, then you can read all 3 prompts and then decide the order that you want to do them in. So I've had a couple students do that. They were like, yeah, I read them, and this one seemed like the hardest. And so I saved that one for last. You can do that too. Read or skim. It kind of depends. If you're a fast reader, then read. But like if you need to skim for like synthesis or something, then look at like the intro paragraph, the topic sentences, and like the conclusion paragraph. Don't skim rhetorical analysis. You need to actually read that one because it's really hard to write a good essay. If you skim, you're probably going to miss stuff. But for synthesis, you can skim. Rhetorical analysis, you need to read. Multiple choice, try to read, but if you're running out of time, skim, I guess. Oh gosh, more questions about sophistication. Okay, like honestly, guys, like if you have not earned the sophistication point yet this year, do not worry about it. It is super hard. If you sometimes get it, focus on like your word choice, focus on situating it in a broader context, but you can make a 5 composite without getting the sophistication point. Okay, how do you cite sources on synthesis? I just answered this a couple minutes ago. So you want to put it in a parenthetical citation, which just means like parentheses and then like at the end of your sentence. You can reference like the original source, like according to a New York Times article or something like that. That's fine, but you should still put the parenthetical citation. It stands out to the reader too. It's like a lot easier to find them in the essay. What is the sophistication point? If you have to ask that, just don't even worry about it. It's so rare, guys. Like, honestly, like I sometimes pretend it doesn't exist. I give my kids half points for sophistication for like gradebook purposes, but like, yeah, we have like a love-hate relationship with the sophistication point. Would it be like this, source A? Yeah, so you would do parentheses, source A, parentheses, and then your period goes outside. They don't take points off for that, but just put your period outside the parentheses. Best rhetorical devices to write about whatever you see in the passage. Sometimes you'll see stuff that's like not relevant. Like we were doing one a couple weeks ago, and we had students who were like, yeah, like I saw some illusions, but I could not write about them because there was other stuff going on. So just because you see it in there doesn't mean you have to write about it. Should we read all the prompts during the reading period? If you think it's going to help you, yes. If you think it's going to stress you out, then no. Some people get really freaked out by that. Other people like to get the lay of the land. So that's like a personal choice you have to make. I honestly kind of would, because I would be curious and I would want to know, but like some people, it like stresses them out. What format do you recommend for synthesis? An intro and at least 2 body paragraphs. That might not be what you're asking, but for the MCQ, when do we pick no change? Okay, not to be a smart aleck, but when the change isn't needed. Sorry, it's about 11 p.m. here. But that would be for the writing multiple choice. So like if it is genuinely the best as it's phrased and all the other answer choices are like redundant or like cliche, then yeah, go for the no change. Each answer choice has like its, how do I explain this? Like its own equal opportunity of being right. Like they don't, like when teachers create tests, they tend to use C as the most common answer. They might do like all of the above or no change, and they might favor those. But like these are like normed tests. So like there's no like rhyme or reason to it. Like no change could be the right answer. It's fine. I had students tell me that when they were in elementary school, their teacher told them that no change is never the answer. And they went until 10th grade believing that. And then I was like, I gave them a test where it was like an ACT and no change was the answer. And they were like, but our teacher told us it can never be no change. And I was like really shocked by that. So anyway, how many examples should we provide to be safe? You need, for rhetorical analysis, a couple pieces of evidence per paragraph. For argument and synthesis, you can do 2 examples per paragraph or like 1 really strong example. It kind of depends on how you're doing it. How can I write a good introduction? The simplest thing is a thesis, but you want to make sure the rhetorical situation is clear. So you could talk about, like, explain like who's speaking or writing and why, that kind of thing. But intros, it's okay to keep them short. The most important part is your thesis. My teacher told me not to make 1 paragraph for each piece of evidence. Does that really matter? If I'm understanding your question, usually you want to have multiple pieces of evidence in a paragraph, because 1 piece of evidence is not convincing usually. But for argument, if it's 1 really strong example that you can elaborate on, then I could kind of see how you could do 1 per paragraph, but usually you want to pair them together. At least that's just kind of my thoughts. What are universal ideas? Universal truths are kind of like things that are true everywhere. It's like abstract concepts. How do we organize our essays so they make sense? Have good transition words throughout, and you really rely on your topic sentences. I just posted a video probably within the last week about topic sentences. That if you're struggling with your line of reasoning, that video would be really helpful. Just type in Coach Hall writes topic sentences and it should pop up. Is it detrimental to use passive voice? If you can't think of anything else, don't stress about passive voice. Yes, we prefer active voice, but like it's a rough draft. So if you're struggling with passive voice, like, and you can't think of how to change it, don't stress about that. Your content is so much more important. So instead it's nearly 12 a.m. Yes, if you're on the East Coast, please go to bed. As much as I appreciate your views, please go to bed. But yeah, because I'm on Central Time and it's like 11 p.m. right now. Those of you on the, if anyone's here from the Pacific Coast, it's not too bad. Or like Hawaii, Man, I would like to be in Hawaii right now. Can you use multiple examples that are close to each other in aid? Yeah, you can. That are somehow like related. Yeah. If I'm understanding your question right, then yeah. Can you use tone? You can. Remember that tone is created though. So like they don't use tone, it's created. So like word choice creates tone, that kind of thing. So yeah, don't say that it's like that they use tone. But yeah, you can bring up tone for sure. Usually tone is kind of like a complementary thing. Like you can focus on a different choice and then tell what tone it creates. What's the name of the video for rhetorical choices? The one that's like most common. There's something, it's, if you're talking about the one where I talk about the most common rhetorical choices, it's something like, if you type in Coach Hall writes common rhetorical, I think I said devices in the title because more people were asking about devices. Common rhetorical devices, it should pop up. It's from 2020. What happens if we spell something wrong? Do not worry about spelling. As long as they can read it, it's fine. And like if it's phonetically spelled out, it's fine. Spelling, no big deal. As we put a lot of emphasis on spelling in like younger grades, but like you can have spelling mistakes in your essay. It's literally okay. As teachers, we make mistakes too. Like I have typos. It's fine. Like no one's gonna, it's not gonna hurt your score. Like it has to be like completely incoherent for it to really matter. No, you do not need a conclusion. It's nice to have one if it's good, but if you are running out of time, leave it alone. Don't put one. How many sources do I need in synthesis? You must have 3 sources. Before you are done with your synthesis essay, before you move on to something else, go back and make sure that you have cited 3 different sources. Citing the same source twice does not count as 2 sources. It's still 1 source. Any tips on if you struggle in timing in general? Okay, let's talk about saving time. If you are running behind, just write a thesis. Short intro, just a thesis. 2 body paragraphs, no conclusion. And like, honestly, like even if you're trying to like write and you have writer's block, try to put something on the page because if it's not there, we can't score it. So, yeah, just because a lot of times kids will like cross stuff out and like it might have been okay. So don't turn off that like inner perfectionist tomorrow. What do you do when the passage is really boring or you don't understand it? I find that if I take notes like every paragraph, it helps me stay engaged. Some of the passages are going to be boring, I'm going to be honest with you, but you kind of have to power through it. Sorry, I thought I heard something. I was worried that my baby had woken up, but I think he's still asleep. I think I'm hearing like video games in the other room. Tips for focus during the exam. If you're focusing like on essays, sometimes it helps to like, okay, like take your pen and like track where you're reading because it like tells your eyes where to focus. Taking notes, like each paragraph can help, or like not like a ton of notes, like a note. Outlining helps you stay focused because you have a game plan. If your proctor will allow you to chew gum, then some people say like that helps as well. Okay. Lots of people are asking about multiple choice tips. I've given a lot. I know some people probably just joined, but we've kind of gone over that. Like use process of elimination. Know that at least one answer is going to be close but not right. So look at like the actual wording of the answer choices. Answer all questions, even if it's just a guess. What can we bring to the exam? Okay. You should, if you know your teacher's not going to provide pens and pencils, bring 2 pencils that are already sharpened, not mechanical pencils. Bring at least 2 pens that write well, that the ink won't bleed. It needs to be blue or black ink. Some schools require an ID. Our school doesn't, or like it's handled separately. I don't know. So I don't know about that. And you can bring a snack for the break. Like you have a 10-minute break. How many rhetorical strategies do we need? At least 1 per paragraph. So minimum of 2. All right, let's see. Yeah, we aren't. I know. I wish y'all were allowed to bring highlighters. I don't know why they can't. I know like I don't know if they think it's like a way to cheat or something, like, but I wish you all could have highlighters. Someone asked me today, like one of my students asked if they could bring other colored pens instead of highlighters, but I told them no because I wasn't sure about that. Like, but I wish y'all could have highlighters. One year, a kid asked me, can I bring Flair pens that are all blue or black ink, but different shades so I can highlight? But I think that's just like extreme. Do you recommend a conclusion only if it's going to help your essay? If it's just going to be restating everything you already said, then you don't need it, especially if you're running out of time. What do I have to do to get a bare minimum of 3 on the Lang test? Like point wise, approximately half your multiple choice right, and then 4 out of 6 is on your essays. Can you get a 4 out of 4 on evidence without a counter argument? Yeah, a counter argument's not mandatory. Do I need to use a graphic for synthesis? My teacher made me do that, but oh yeah, no, there's no rule that like, okay, so the visual text, like they can be helpful, but if you don't know how to use it, then don't. You just need 3 sources on synthesis. Nothing says that you must use a particular source. So your teacher was probably just trying to get you to like practice, but like if you don't want to use the visual text and cite that source, then you don't have to. All right, so if you're watching over on YouTube, please do me a favor. If you're finding this valuable, give it a thumbs up. And if you're on TikTok, feel free to hit the screen, tap the screen to give hearts. That would help me out a little bit if you don't mind. For synthesis, would we do 1 source per paragraph? No. Well, okay, I shouldn't say no, but like the fact that my gut reaction was no should tell you something. For synthesis, it's good to put 2 sources in a paragraph because that creates a conversation. That is a recommendation, not a rule. But if you have like 3 paragraphs and 1 source per paragraph for synthesis, your essay feels really disjointed and it's harder to transition. So usually you put 2 sources per paragraph. How do we summarize less and analyze more? Focus on why. Use the word because, use illustrates, highlights, suggests, but just keep asking yourself why. So you make a claim and you prove it, but then ask yourself like, so what or why? Why is this important? What does this tell us? That kind of thing. Should we bring backpacks or a small bag? Good question. Usually they like make you either keep it outside the testing room or like put it on a certain spot. So like if you need your backpack for later in the day, like if you have other classes, like my students are bringing their backpacks, but like they can't access them during the test. And our school, you have to turn in your cell phones and stuff. So like if you need your backpack, you can, but like it's kind of up to your school. Should we use logos, ethos, pathos? Not only those. Choices create appeals. So please don't do a paragraph about logos, one about ethos, one about pathos. If you have questions about rhetorical appeals, I have a video that if you type in Coach Hall writes rhetorical appeals, it tells you how to actually write about them better. So I would recommend that video. Any tips on if your arm gets numb? Okay, for real though, like during your 10-minute break before you start your essays, make sure that you get up and move around a little bit. If you are like if your hand is hurting as you're reading the sources, like literally go like this, get the blood pumping, that kind of thing. I've literally watched students like sit there and like massage their hand because your arm hurts or your hand hurts. Like it's normal. I don't know what to tell you other than that, but like, yeah, you just got to kind of power through it. But like during the downtime, if you're like reading or thinking, like move your hand around a little bit. I dropped out from AP Lang, so I never did rhetorical analysis. Which passages are the harder ones? Okay, so David, are you taking the AP Lang test tomorrow since you dropped out of AP Lang? Which passages? Okay, synthesis has passages, has sources rather. My students tell me argument's the harder essay because they have to rely on their own knowledge. So yeah, so synthesis has sources. It's kind of like a DBQ if you're used to like AP history. My students say that argument's harder because they have to choose their own evidence. I don't know if that's what you're asking, but that's what I got out of it. What is a crucial tip for the 4th point for evidence? Make sure you have evidence and commentary for all 4 claims, or not all 4 claims. That's 4th point. Sorry, all claims. You don't need 4 claims. Make sure you have evidence and commentary for all claims. Make sure you have more commentary than evidence, and make sure it's like even. Like don't dump in a bunch of evidence and then have like some commentary, kind of like even it out, if that makes sense. But you need to support all claims thoroughly in order to get a 4 out of 4. What happens if you don't know the words from the multiple choice? If you're talking about the passage itself, just keep reading and move on because it's probably not going to matter. If it's one of the ones where they ask you, like, what does this word mean? Just look for a context clue. So read above it and below it, like the surrounding paragraph, and usually there's a context clue. If it's a word in an answer choice that you don't know, then use process of elimination. So, like, if none of the other answer choices fit, then yeah, choose that one. But they've kind of gotten away from using really hard words in the answer choices, thankfully. Doesn't citing 3 sources automatically guarantee at least a 2 in evidence points for synthesis? I think so, yes. Like in theory. So yeah, like literally, if you are, I don't know why you'd be like, unless you took your test out of order, but like for whatever reason, if you're taking synthesis as your last essay, you decide to put it last. Like I've literally had students in like a mock exam that I proctored where they like were somehow running out of time. They like had only done 2 sources, so they just like quoted a different source. It was there, so they were eligible for the points. So yeah, so make sure you have 3 sources. How do we format our essays? Intro, at least 2 body paragraphs, and a conclusion. Have topic sentences, evidence, commentary, and a concluding sentence. Most common letter choice to answer. It's not C. Okay. I don't want to mislead people, but like I went on the College Board's AP Classroom and I tallied up how many answer choices like each one did for all 3 tests. And across all 3 tests, there was not one that was the most common every time. But the top 3 of the 5 were A, and D and B. There was one test where B was the most common, but the other test, it was more like A and D. So take that information for what you will, though they don't plan this stuff. So I could have just told you that. And tomorrow E could be more popular. So like, but yeah, just if you're guessing, just pick a letter, like, especially if you have it, if you don't have time to narrow it down. Like, let's say you have 5 questions left and there's like 30 seconds, just bubble in something, choose one letter and just go for it. Are personal pronouns allowed? They are for arguments if you're writing about yourself. You can technically write about personal experience and synthesis if it's relevant. Do not use personal pronouns in rhetorical analysis. Yeah, just in general. Not for rhetorical analysis. What's a good way to expand your paragraphs? Okay, so the key to expanding your paragraphs is really to just add more commentary, especially if you know what evidence you want to use. So use the word because, and keep asking yourself like why or so what. What essays should you do counter arguments? They're not required. If you want to do a counter argument, you can do it in argument and synthesis. There really isn't a reason to do counter argument for rhetorical analysis. Literally about to cry. Oh, I'm sorry. Just do the best you can tomorrow. That's like the fact that you guys are taking the test is impressive in and of itself. Okay, someone said, I need you to explain this. Okay. So for my evidence, how specific and detailed must it be? The question is broad, but answer the best you can. Okay, so for arguments, you need to give very concrete examples. So make sure that you're explaining like the event or about the person and why it's relevant, and be very specific in order to demonstrate how it proves your thesis. If we're talking about rhetorical analysis, you want to choose like precise quotes that prove your claim. Same for synthesis. Does a concession always need to be refuted? I think yes, because like it's sort of just natural to refute it. But yeah, like so in theory, yes. I don't want to say always, but like most of the time it should be. Tips on finding rhetorical strategies. Ask yourself, what is the writer doing? Tips on being more concise but not vague. Take out extra wording that's not needed, like filler words. Like instead of saying like for rhetorical analysis, like he is able to convey, just say he conveys. Choose strong verbs and add adverbs and adjectives that are precise. That's going to help. Does repetitive language hurt your score? It depends on what is happening. Like if your commentary is repetitive, then it could make it be a 2 out of 4. In row B, if we're just talking about like you use the same word over and over, that's like less of an issue. But you can try for synonyms. Like if you have one word that you're using over and over, try to think of a synonym. But if you're making the same point and over again, like that's a more severe thing. My teacher made us watch one of your YouTube videos. Well, tell your teacher I said thank you for the support. How do you structure your essay body paragraphs when you make a concession? I have a video about this on YouTube that shows a couple of examples. You can also Google different examples, but if you've never done a concession, like I would not try tomorrow. Like today or like tomorrow is not the time to try anything crazy new. Just kind of stick to the stuff that you know. But if you want a video about it, type in Coach Hall writes concession and it should come up as a video. Commentary tips so it depends on the essay. General tips, use the word because, use verbs like highlights, illustrates, suggests, demonstrates, reveals. I have lots of commentary videos too if you need a little extra help. You don't have to watch them tonight. If you can watch them in the morning as you're getting ready if you want to. For rhetorical analysis, make sure your commentary connects the rhetorical choice to the rhetorical situation. So like, why are they making that choice for that audience on that occasion, and connect it to message, argument, or purpose. But for synthesis and argument, just commentary, tell like, so what, like, why does it matter? Like, what is it showing us? How does it impact society? Or like if it's education or the environment, whatever your topic is, like who is helped or harmed by it, things like that. My exam is in an hour. Okay, so you must be in a totally different time zone. What is the best tip that has the biggest difference? Really develop your paragraphs and try to add as much commentary as possible. That's the biggest thing that's going to make the difference on your essays. But yeah, where are you from that you're taking it in an hour? You must be over like are you in Asia? Are you in the Middle East? Because I know they're on a totally separate time zone, but they have a different test too. Best devices for rhetorical analysis. Honestly, go by what you see in the passage. There are some that are more common. So like repetition, comparison, contrast, examples, anecdotes, those tend to be more common, but like really go by what you see in the passage that you can actually write about. Do you need 3 examples for argument from your own knowledge? Not necessarily. You can do 1 or 2 examples per paragraph. So 3 is probably a good number as a general ballpark, but it's not a rule. What broad topics do you think the prompt will be about? I can't predict that. They've done a lot of like abstract stuff in the past, so I have no idea. I wish I could, but honestly, the only thing I can like not predict, but like at some point, like because they've been relying on a lot of speeches, at some point we're going to get a letter or an article for RA, but that's not really a prediction, nor is it a helpful statement. How do you identify the audience in rhetorical? Okay, so like where do you put it in your thesis? So if it's a speech, you could say like, in so-and-so's speech to audience, they do this and this for their purpose, and that's fine. If it's a speech, there's going to be a direct audience. Like a commencement speech is a graduation speech. They're speaking to graduates. If it's a eulogy, they're speaking to the people present at the funeral. If it's at a convention, it's the people at the convention. Sometimes these things are televised too, but like usually there's an immediate audience. If it's a letter, the audience is who's receiving the letter. If it's an article, think about who would actually read that article. Like, are they targeting educators, parents, politicians, that kind of thing? The audience is not everyone. It's a specific group of people. It could be a small group or a big group. My teacher said that when you reference limitations to your argument becomes more sophisticated. Is that true? In theory, yes. There's lots of things that we say as teachers that are true for like writing in general. And then like the exam, you just got to remember that it's a time limit. So you just got to do the best you can. How do you identify the audience correctly? I did that one. For multiple choice, how do you avoid choosing the distractor? Okay, so things to keep in mind. I have a little note card here. If the answer is only partially true, it's distracting. It's not your right answer. If the answer doesn't actually answer the question, it could sound good, but it might not answer the question. It's not the right answer. If it's too broad and like there's another answer that's accurate and precise, choose that one. And be mindful of like really charged language, like really, like, how do I explain that? Like really words that have really specific meanings. Like if it says manipulates, but the person's not actually manipulating anything, then that's not your answer. That kind of stuff. Someone said, what if we just don't show up? Well, then you won't get a score. But I know you're saying that just because you're like it's probably stressful, but like, yeah, like you want to show up. You want to try. That's the thing. Like I read some essays last year that like kids didn't even attempt certain questions. Like they just literally didn't even write anything. It was easy to score because it was a 0. Or they'd write like one sentence, like, please try tomorrow. The fact that you're watching these lives either on YouTube or TikTok tells me that you care. So for your own sake, please try. Okay. Can you give an example of a good argument thesis? I have a couple of videos on my channel. One's about like making effective claims and stuff. And I have a couple about like counter argument thesis statements for question 1 and question 3. So if you want, I don't have like an example off the top of my head, but if you go to those videos, it's there. Can I use all people or public figures for my argument? Yeah, technically. It might be better to like vary up your evidence, but you can rely on just people. That's fine. Which essay is most okay to only write 2 body paragraphs? Technically, you can do it for any of them. There's not one where it's better than the others. Do you hate when students leave notes to people who write? Yeah, not that I hate it, but like, please don't leave your reader notes. Just don't. I mean, do we read it? Yes. Does it affect your score? No. Like, don't, like, some people will write like sob stories and stuff, and like just focus on the test. How are AP graders instructed to award the sophistication point? Based on the rubric. So if we are unsure if it gets the point, we all have like what's called a table leader that we pass it off to and stuff like that. So like last year, if I wasn't sure, because like sometimes what I would give in my classroom versus the real test is different. So there were a couple, actually, honestly, I read for the international exam last year and I only had a couple that I really thought were sophisticated. But if I wasn't sure, I would give it to like my boss, if you will, to look at to make sure, because we want to make sure they're accurate. So but they look for consistency. It cannot just be like one line that's sophisticated. Like if you have one really good sentence, it's good, but it doesn't help your sophistication. Tips for writing conclusion paragraphs. I have a couple of videos about this as well if you want more details, but some things to think about for RA, rhetorical analysis. How is this message or argument significant today? Broaden your context for your conclusion. Or if it's like a historically significant passage, then what's the significance of it historically? For synthesis and argument, how is the issue relevant today? Or like, what is the biggest takeaway? You can technically put a call to action in your conclusion, but like don't make it cheesy and like don't automatically do it. If it fits, it fits. Also ask yourself, like, why is it relevant to people? Like short term, long term, how does it help or harm? That kind of thing. Where did you get the whiteboards in the back? Target. Amazon, Target. That's an easy question to answer. This is the best I can do at decorating, by the way. This is it. What do you do if you don't have enough evidence for argument? Just honestly, worst case scenario, really expand on what you have, but you need at least one piece for argument, at least one example per paragraph. If you can pair 2 together, that works better. So just kind of ask yourself, like, what else do I know about? So for instance, like a couple weeks ago, I gave my students a prompt. It's the exploring the unknown prompt. And the first thing that came to mind, I let them like work together to brainstorm. And the first thing that came to mind for this one group was Moana. So they're like, what else can we write about? And then they're like, and I'm laughing because they actually wrote really good essays. Like if anyone's going to write about Disney, these girls killed it. But they're like, what else can we write about? And they're like, Rapunzel from Tangled. And they write this paragraph, right? And I'm like, y'all, like, you could have talked about Moana, like adventuring into the unknown, like immigration. You could have even talked about like going off to college because a couple of them have older siblings that go off to college. They're like, oh, and I'm like, so they paired Disney with Disney and it worked. I just found it really funny because there were other directions they could have gone, but they, by golly, they went the Disney route and they stuck with it. And they gave me a beautiful explanation of Moana. And I've never actually watched Tangled, and like I understood Tangled based on their description, so they went for it. So like if you have to play to your strengths and what you know is something that other people might consider cheesy, just go for it. Like I've had a lot of students this year write about Simone Biles because they watched her in the Olympics. Go for it if you know her. If you've watched a TV show and you know the plot and you cannot think of anything else, then tell us about it and make it relevant, obviously. But like, I had a student like talk about I think it was like an anime character before, and like, but they made it like they explicitly connected it to the prompt. And I was like, okay, it works. I've had students write about like athletes and all that. So go with what you know if you're struggling. Okay. Should you mention choices in your thesis? Yes. For rhetorical analysis, yes, you need to. They look for that. Like they look for like, do you have choices? It doesn't have to be nouns. It can be verbs and it can be more open-ended, but you have to tell us what they're doing for rhetorical analysis. Tips for rhetorical analysis. Make sure that you are connecting the choice to the message, argument, or purpose. Make sure you have plenty of commentary that tells us why they made that choice, and like dig deep. Don't just say to emphasize or something. Tell us what they're doing and why they're doing it, and ask yourself why this choice for this audience on this occasion. I need to get that saying on a t-shirt because I say it all the time. If it's 3 sources per synthesis, how does it split up? Like 2 in one paragraph and 1 in the other? It can. I recommend 2 sources per paragraph. You need a minimum of 3 sources. So you can do 2 in 1 or 1 in 2 if that's how you're structuring it. But I would try to put 2 sources per paragraph if possible. Do you get us for AP Lit next year? I don't actually teach AP Lit, but I could. I just prefer Lang, and we have another teacher at my school who does Lit. So I made like 1 or 2 AP Lit videos, but I really feel more comfortable with AP Lang videos. But AP Lit, Garden of English, Tim Freitas has some videos for that, and he's probably going to do more AP Lit content next year, is what he told me. If you misunderstand a passage, will it lower your score? It kind of depends. Like depends on how severe of a misunderstanding we're talking about. Do they give you the rubrics on the exam? No, but what they do is they're going to give you bullet points. So there's going to be a bullet point that tells you to have a thesis, one that says evidence, one that says commentary, and the 4th bullet point is like, make sure you have good punctuation and spelling. So they kind of tell you the rubric and the bullet points. How to do MCQs more efficiently. Do not waste time trying to be perfect. So you're going to spend for reading about 15, honestly, like reading is about 15 minutes per passage, 15 to 17 minutes per passage. Don't linger on any one particular question. If you are unsure, narrow it down to as few choices as possible, guess and move on and come back to it if you have more time. How to not be so general when mentioning diction. Okay, so add an adjective in front of it. So like, is it passionate? Is it patriotic? Don't just say like negative or positive, because like negative could be frustrated, negative could be angry, it could be harsh. So like not just negative or positive, but like put a tone word or an adjective in front of it if you're talking about diction. I have a video about that, by the way. If you type in like Coach Hall writes how to write about diction, it should pop up. Okay, I was taught to have for synthesis 3 reasons, therefore 3 body paragraphs with 1 source in each paragraph. I recommend, okay, you can definitely have 3 paragraphs, 2 to 3 paragraphs. The 1 source per paragraph usually does not lead to a strong essay. It could lead to an essay. It could still get a good score, but usually you want to put 2 sources per paragraph to create that conversation of sources. Your scores come out in July. It's usually like around July 7th, I think. They'll give you an exact date. So, if they haven't already, they'll put it online. But I'm pretty sure it's July because the reading is in June. All right. So let's see. I'll answer a few more questions. It is almost midnight where I am. So I do want to kind of get to bed because I got to get up at 5 a.m. But and same thing for you guys. You need to be resting and as best you can. Though I'm sure some of you are going to be getting the coffee and the energy drinks in the morning as well. All right. So if you're watching on YouTube, do me a huge favor and hit the thumbs up button if you find this valuable. And on TikTok, if you don't mind just tapping your screen to give me a couple hearts, I'd greatly appreciate it. That would help. Someone said, good night. Thank you so much. You are so welcome. Good luck tomorrow. Can you write about pop culture and argument? Yeah, you can. It might not be the most sophisticated evidence, but you can, if it's the best that you can provide, go for it. Sometimes those are actually more interesting anyway. Because sometimes everybody writes about like the same thing. Like last year for perfection, weirdly, like I read a lot, like at our state mock exam, I read so many essays about perfection and Edison and the light bulb. And so when we finally got like an essay that didn't talk about Edison, I was like, oh, this is interesting. I don't know why everyone wrote about Edison. How or do we have to have the author's purpose in the RRA thesis? Yes, it's better if you do. It's helpful. It's really helpful if you do. Yes. So just say like to, and then like whatever verb you want, like to motivate, blah, 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 to like whatever. Yeah, but definitely it really does help to put it in there. Should I do 2 sources in the first and then 1 or like okay, so if it's synthesis, try for 2 sources in each body paragraph if you can. It's okay to reuse a source as long as you have 3 sources. For rhetorical analysis, I like a closed thesis just because it's a timed test and it's a rough draft. That might not be what I would tell you if you were in like a college composition class, but for tomorrow, a closed thesis is absolutely fine. Should we avoid politics? Most AP readers are they're either teachers or college professors. They come from all over the US and sometimes all over the world. So if you're going to talk about politics, keep it fact-based. I know that's kind of hard to say because like there's contradictory facts on both sides. You can say something like, for the sake of argument, let us assume this. And that way it kind of softens it. But like in general, like I don't know. If I were to generalize, I would say that most AP readers tend to lead more toward the liberal side, but like that doesn't mean you should cater to that. But I would just say like if you're unsure about politics, but you like if you can think of something else, probably go in the other like direction and write about something else. If you have to write about politics, make sure you're talking about like concrete facts. And you might qualify it and just say like for the sake of argument, let us assume this kind of thing. Yeah. I personally try to stay out of politics in my teaching and stuff, and my students tend not to write about it because we talk about like other things to write about. But like, if that's the best you can do, then go for it. Good luck, everybody. Yes, very very good. Good luck. What type of current events can you talk about? It depends on what fits the prompt. If as long as it's like, don't generalize. Like, if the prompt lends itself to like Russia and Ukraine or COVID or Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, like go for it, but make sure you're using concrete information. Someone said, "I hope you have a blessed day." Well, thank you. Can you say how many paragraphs and how many? At least 2 paragraphs per essay. Try for 2 pieces of evidence per paragraph. Just generally. Main differences between rhetorical, synthesis, and argument. Rhetorical is analyzing a speech or letter looking for choices. Synthesis is like a research paper. Argument is kind of like a synthesis, but they don't give you sources. You're welcome, Paige. Thank you for coming. In the refutation, should we include sources? You can. In the synthesis essay, should we include sources in a refutation? You can, but if there isn't one, you don't have to. Can we use personal stories for the synthesis? Yes, as long as it fits. Just make sure you still have 3 sources. Common rhetorical choices, repetition, examples, detail or description, comparison, contrast, anecdotes, things like that. The argument prompts are usually very vague. Yeah, they keep them, like, at least the ones they've used in the past couple of years, they're vague on purpose. They keep it open-ended for a reason. Bye, Zoe. Have a good night. So yeah, they like purposely keep it open-ended. Which is kind of nice, but at the same time, it's kind of frustrating. All right. Good night. A couple of like, yes, some of you really need to be going to bed. Can you give little words or punctuation to add in your essay? So really just focus on like if you want to add like adverbs or adjectives, that would be good. How many sentences is a good paragraph? It really depends. If I had to answer, I'd say 6 to 10, I guess. It's more about quality, not quantity. Okay. Juxtaposition is meaningful contrast. So like basically just contrast. Is syntax considered a choice? It can be. People write about it. I think it's really hard to write about syntax, honestly. How do you blend commentary and evidence? Well, so you're going to want your evidence first, and it should be followed by commentary. And so you could say, like, this example reveals, or something like that. Like, you can kind of refer to it. I tell my students to always put a noun after this. So instead of saying like this illustrates, put like this quote illustrates, or this testimony, or this example, or something like that. Okay. Do all the evidence have to correlate with each other? You can pull evidence from like different categories if that's what you're asking. Like you should be having, like, you basically need to make sure that your evidence proves whatever claim you're making, but you can do like a historical example and a current event and stuff. That's fine. Or like pop culture, personal experience, whatever you want to do. Okay. It is almost midnight here. So I am going to log off. And I hope you guys get some sleep. But if you still need to study, shameless plug here, but please check out Coach Hall Writes on YouTube. I have a cram for the exam playlist where I chose videos that I think are most helpful. I also have playlists for all of the essay types and things like that. So please watch those. And, just someone told me last year that they watched him on like 1.5 or 2 times the speed. If that works for you, go for it. But yeah, thank you so much for coming and asking questions and being patient with me as I navigated the chat. It's kind of hard when it comes in fast, but good night, good luck, believe in yourselves. You've got this. And come back to the channel and let me know how it goes. Best advice I can give you is right now, get some sleep and write a lot tomorrow, and just trust your instincts. And if the exam is hard, don't freak out, because it's going to be hard for everybody. It's an AP test. So don't get defeated before it's over. All right. Good night. I'm going to shut down TikTok and end on YouTube.